Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Iacino. I'm the Senior Manager, Marketing Programs for Nielsen's Marketing Effectiveness Group. On behalf of the entire Nielsen team, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. I have a little housekeeping before we begin. We will be recording the webinar and making it available to everyone who registered, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email post-webinar. Also, we will take your questions during a Q&A session at the end, but you can submit them at any time using the webinar interface, so send them in as you think of them. Today's webinar, Put Your Money Where Your Consumer Is, How Audience-Based Targeting Drives Higher ROI, will be presented by Tina Feiger, who leads the Analytics Consulting team for Nielsen's Consumer Packaged Goods Attribution Solution. In her role, Tina works directly with advertisers to help them identify opportunities to improve the efficiency of their marketing investments through granular attribution measurement capabilities. Without further ado, Tina, you may begin.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everybody. As Nicole just said, today I'm going to talk to you about putting your money where your consumer is and how audience-based targeting drives higher ROI. So let's jump right into it. So the consumer packaged goods industry has spent billions of dollars on traditional advertising, but digital, as we all know and love, is really changing the way CPG brands market their products. So much so that CPG digital ad spend in the US is projected to grow to $11 billion this year. It's a lot of money. But CPG companies have a challenge here, right? CPG marketers know it's important to reach consumers online and are investing in digital media, but most brands don't have insight into the impact these ads are having on in-store purchases and which tactics work best to drive incremental volume. And why do they have this gap? It's really because the retailer owns the sales data. CPG manufacturers often don't have direct access to the sales data they need and the consumer they want to reach, or insight into how their digital advertising really affects sales. And unfortunately, this lack of transparency and high uncertainty in the digital advertising ecosystem has created tremendous inefficiency for advertisers. This means increased digital waste, lack of transparency, and more inefficient media dollars. So in order to help address this particular challenge that CPG companies face and to support just greater transparency for the ad industry overall, we conducted a meta-analysis leveraging Nielsen's multi-touch attribution solution that uses consumer sales data and digital exposure data. We used this data in our attribution study to match the online exposure and offline sales data, allocating credit to the marketing touchpoints that drove incremental household conversion and leveraged our advanced analytics. And using this data, Nielsen offers CPG advertisers the unique ability to analyze their digital ads and their audiences, overcoming the data limitations and transparency issues that they face. So just a little bit on this meta-analysis that we conducted here. Using our attribution solution, we measured the impact of digital advertising on more than 30 CPG brands. We looked at more than 750 campaigns and $258 million of online ad spend. And ultimately, this analysis, which is actually elaborated in a white paper that we also published, helps us look at CPG advertisers and answer the questions of whether the type of data used to target audiences matters in driving impact, and it does, that's why we're here today, and what type of data should be leveraged to maximize return on investment. You can see here that the market that we're really looking at is focused on the United States, but a lot of these findings I think can be leveraged outside of the United States and outside of just the CPG industry. So using our data, we really want to answer the question of what works. So we're going to bring some transparency to the table and help you know what works in terms of reaching our consumer. So on behalf of our clients, this is what we found. Number one, audience data type is a major driver of ROI. This means that understanding data types and sources is the first step in establishing a digital strategy for building an audience. You need to go out there and get those high quality data sources to drive your digital strategy. Number two, purchase-based data performs the best. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but advertisers should really focus on high quality data sources that leverage verified actions, we're going to talk a lot more about that in a second, to create targets and drive the greatest impact to their sales. Number 3, broad-based targeting achieves lower ROI. It's important that you know the goal of your campaign and the goal for every audience you're going after before you determine what audience type to use and what targeting type to really leverage. And finally, centralized data outperforms silos. Focusing on an advertiser-led centralized digital platform that leverages technology is a must if you want to win in the digital space to drive those incremental purchases. So we are going to dive into each of these a lot more deeply. This is really a big money slide here, so everybody can take it in. But as I mentioned, there's many types of data and sources out there, and understanding the data types and sources is really the first step for building an audience for targeting. And that really brings us to our first point, which is audience data type is a major driver of ROI. So as we can see on this slide here, Nielsen broke all digital activity into 9 main audience targeting buckets. This chart ranks ROI by data type from the highest performing, which is purchase-based data, to the lowest performing, which is demographic data. And what really jumps out at us? Well, clearly purchase-based data drives the highest ROI. When I say purchase-based targeting, I'm really talking about, for example, people who bought from a competitor in the past 3 months, or are lapsed buyers of your brand. And ultimately, purchase-based targeting can actually drive an ROI that's 3 times better than the average. And I think that leads a lot of people to ask, well, doesn't purchase-based targeting come at a higher cost? And for CPG, it really does. It comes at a higher cost to get that higher quality data, but we find that the increased effectiveness you get when you use purchase-based targeting and purchase-based data does offset that higher cost and help you get those higher returns. Now, purchase-based targeting is very different when you think about CPG companies versus the direct-to-consumer world, because in the CPG space, the purchase-based data is not owned by the advertiser. CPG advertisers need to go out there and find those data sources that they can use to create their purchase-based audiences. It does take time, money, and energy by the advertiser, but it's really worth it. The best manager of purchase-based data is the advertiser, and advertisers should be finding and gathering purchase-based data sources. This is deterministic, unbiased, action-based data, and the advertiser really needs to lead this strategy. In the direct-to-consumer world, purchase-based targeting is oftentimes part of that first-party bucket, which is 4th on this list here, which is also a data source that CPG companies use, but when we think about first-party data, it's different between CPG and direct-to-consumer advertisers. So how CPG companies really do need to go out and get their purchase-based data is very different from the direct-to-consumer space. So speaking of first-party data, it's also another type of deterministic targeting, which is very high on the list. And this is a really great data source to use because typically the advertiser for CPG and direct-to-consumer own this data. It also tends to be based on a known action a consumer took, like downloading a coupon or filling out a survey on your website. It also drives really strong ROIs. With first-party data, the consumer or the person you're going after is actually expressing interest in your product. So it's a really high-quality data set. Second on this list, ranked by ROI, we have lookalike modeling. This is data that is modeled on the behavior of consumers who took a verified action. So while it's not the consumer who actually took the action, lookalike models are finding a bunch of potential consumers who look like the action-based consumer. It also allows us to expand our targeting data set to go after a whole set of future consumers who you may not have otherwise reached. Ultimately, this is an inferred data set. We can infer that due to the fact that these people look like those who took an action, they're high potential as incremental purchasers. Lookalike modeling is also an interesting place to be because the quality of your model is very dependent on the seed that you use to create the lookalike. If you build a lookalike on a high quality seed, for example, loyal purchasers of your brand, you'll find that the incremental returns can be much, much higher than models built on lower quality seeds. The other thing that's really great about lookalike modeling is that you can continuously update your model over time. For example, If you build a lookalike model from people who download coupons from your website, you can use machine learning to continuously improve your lookalike model over time as people continue to download coupons and make it that much better on an ongoing basis. So lookalike modeling is a really strong performer. And we also have retargeting at the top of the list. Like lookalikes, it's another inferred data set, meaning we can infer it would be a good target because, again, people are taking an action like visiting your website or searching for your brand or a relevant keyword online. So ultimately, when you think about these top 4 buckets, what do they all have in common? Well, they're all based on some sort of action that a person took that allows you to say, I know they're interested in my brand, or I can infer that they would be interested in my brand or category based on what they told me about themselves. You need to know your target and seek out these high quality data sources. We found that the more you know about the consumer you're going after, the more precise you can be with your targeting or messaging. Our recommendation is to drive ROI, start with your audiences that you can build on verified actions. Let's take a look at these other buckets that are below the break-even point. And these tend to be some of your broad reach or broad-based targeting types, such as geographic, contextual, demographic targeting. For all of these targeting types, we don't know as much about the consumer. They're not necessarily taking an action that we can verify that allows us to say for certain that they'd be interested in your brand. But what they do allow us to do is increase our reach and go after consumers we might not be able to talk to if we're just focusing on our action-based verified audiences. They can also be used for equity strategies. Ultimately, how you decide which targeting type you use is really important when you're creating your digital strategy. And how do you decide that? Well, the answer really is it depends on the goal of your campaign and the goal of each audience. At the end of the day, most advertisers should be using a range of these targeting types, using broad-based targeting to supplement your action-based audiences. Now, we do recommend that you have ways to confirm that you're using high-quality broad-based data. Make sure that when you use these broad-based reach audiences, you have ad verification to ensure that they're really reaching the people you intend and can be viewed. Overall, the type of data you use can impact results in ROI significantly, and knowing what you're trying to achieve will help you match the data type with the desired outcome. There's a wide range of data sources available to define and identify audiences. They come at varying costs, so managing them is critical. But CPG advertisers have a lot of opportunity when it comes to targeting and creating robust digital strategies. So I know there's a lot of content on that slide, and I think one of the things that it leads me to ask is, well, how do I manage all of this data and all of these, all the different data sources that build these audiences and these different targeting strategies? And earlier I mentioned that centralized data outperforms silos, so I'm going to dig into that point. So we found that brands that lean on technology to centralize their data sources can actually execute more informed and precise audience communication because they're able to be more consumer and audience focused. One of the enabling capabilities for advertiser-led digital operating models is a data management platform, or as we refer to it, a DMP. DMPs allow you to bring all of that data and audience characteristic information into one place to create anonymous audiences that can be activated directly into the demand-side ad ecosystem. Therefore, you're bringing all of the data into a centralized hub. They help plan for audience scale and overlap, implement central frequency management, which helps eliminate waste. They oftentimes have the best and most deterministic audience data sources, and they bring their own data to the party as well to supplement the data that the advertiser brings in. So there's a lot of benefits of using a centralized data strategy or a DMP. When you bring all this data into one centralized system, you manage your data to create precise audiences and precise messages. But this doesn't mean that you should just let technology run the show. In order to have a robust, successful digital strategy, you need an advertiser-led, centralized message so that everybody working to promote that brand has the same goal in mind. This really enables transparency across all data sources and execution, allowing advertisers to be more informed and precise in audience communication. When everybody at the advertiser and agencies can have access to the same data at the same time, This is really when you can have a successful data strategy. Advertisers that are successful really do put in the time, money, and energy to create and manage their strategy. And Nielsen actually found that through our multi-touch attribution research, CPG advertising enabled by a centralized management platform actually outperformed non-centralized activity by 3 to 4 times based on ROI. So it's a big difference there. So we're going to take a look at a couple case studies here. So this first case study shows an advertiser we work with that in Q4 2017 was not sure when or how to really optimize their portfolio across the targeting types they were using, or how to really introduce other targeting types. Initially, this brand was primarily reaching its audience using geographic targeting with a broad-based digital strategy. And as you can see, they did have a pretty good ROI at 90 cents back in Q4 2017. So they were doing well, but they knew that they weren't optimizing. They knew that they could perform better. And after analyzing the brand's results, we suggested a test and learn on purchase-based targeting and also introducing some retargeting into their portfolio. So in Q1 2018, they started playing around with these other targeting types, and they did this by leaning into that test and learn mentality. They executed a lot of test and learns in Q1 2018 and into Q2 2018. And when they were able to try out other targeting types and lean into other data sources, they were able to get their ROI all the way up to $2. They continue to do test and learn, to date. This is a huge improvement from what they did see in Q4 of 2017. And what it really comes back to is that they had this test and learn mentality. In the digital space, you can be extremely agile and make quick decisions. It's important that you have this test and learn mentality where you can go out there, try new data sources, try new audiences, and hope that you hit the ones that can drive sales for your brand and get you incremental consumers. So that's the first case study that we had. The second case study that I'll show today is another advertiser that Nielsen's working with, and this advertiser uses all types of targeting, and across the board. They use demographic, contextual, behavioral, lookalike, retargeting, purchase-based targeting, and more. And what I wanted to focus in on is just 2 of the targeting types that they use: behavioral and purchase-based targeting. And this chart actually has a dot representing the spend and ROI for each unique audience within the broader behavioral and purchase-based bucket. So we have spend on the y-axis here and profit ROI on the x-axis, and each audience is a single dot. And what you can see is that the results are not as black and white as they may have seemed when we looked at that chart, that graph on a previous slide that had the bar chart that ranked ROI. Right? What we see here is that within each target audience type, there are multiple audiences that you can actually go after. And there's multiple ways that you can succeed or not succeed within each of these targeting type groupings. So you can see that there are audiences that are extremely successful and drive high ROIs and others that don't. So if the goal of your strategy is to focus only on ROI in the short term, what we would say is, or what you'd try to do, is get all of these audience dots as far to the right as possible, right? That would be the goal. And probably you'd find that the lower you spend, you'd be well below diminishing returns. You might see those ROIs go up. And obviously that's not the smartest strategy that we could recommend for any advertiser. You really need to focus on not only maximizing profit, but making sure that you're putting the spend behind it to maximize your volume, and also you have that long-term view in mind. So if we take a look at the purchase-based target audience graph that's on the right of this slide, we can see that once again, there's many different audiences that are used, and some have high ROIs and some don't. But there's a few audiences that I really want to dig into. So the first audience we can see on the right says retention target. I know it might be a little small, but all the way to the right, we have a retention target audience. This advertiser had a strategy, like many who use purchase-based targeting, of reaching consumers who they want to retain in their business. So in this case, when they were going after retention targets, they're talking to people who actually purchased their brand in the past. So they've already expressed an interest and a willingness to try their product, right? This type of targeting allows them to go after, for example, lapsed buyers, or people who regularly buy the product, but maybe not as frequently as they would like, or even people who are loyal and buying the product very frequently but want to trade up. So when you think about retention targets and the fact that these consumers have already purchased the brand, we would expect a higher ROI because it should be easier to get people that are already interested, already trying, already purchasing to make an additional incremental purchase. So we have retention targets that we might expect to have a much higher ROI. But on the flip side, there's also a different type of target, so an acquisition target that I want to highlight. And with acquisition targets, we're really trying to convert people who may not have bought the brand or maybe even the category in the past. So these are really new users. And based on their strategy, based on this client's or this advertiser's strategy, these are people that they think should be purchasing their brand or category. And so when you go after this type of target, acquisition targets, you typically need to put in more time, energy, and money to bring these new consumers into your brand or your category. And you might not expect the higher ROI in the short term as you would expect from a retention target. However, you know that bringing them into your brand or potentially even your category is going to give you a whole lot more in terms of lifetime value. So when you're defining success for each audience that you're working with, you need to make sure that the success criteria matches the audience you're going after. This advertiser also had a really robust test and learn strategy, which I actually point to at the bottom of this graph of the purchase-based target audiences. The great thing about test and learns is that you don't need to put a lot of money, as you can see, into these audiences to really test them and see how they're performing. So you can go out there, be creative, and execute against new audiences. And if they don't work, you shouldn't have had to put that much spend behind them to find out that they don't work. But if they do work, you likely found new audiences and future incremental consumers who you might not have considered or reached in the past. So when you do reallocate spend toward the audiences that are exceeding their success criteria, really focus on a clear business strategy, a test and learn plan, and an optimization plan to ensure that you're maximizing your digital investment. All right, so what have we really learned here today? Well, the first thing that you can do with these results is see how your digital marketing performance stacks up against the ROI ranking that I presented a few slides back. I would really encourage everybody to go back and take a look at your own portfolio and look at what you're doing in terms of targeting and audience activation, and see if you're leaning into the areas that I recommended you lean into. If you're going for short-term ROI, are you using those audiences that are based on verified actions? If you're going for a broader reach strategy to talk to more people and build equity, are you using more of a combined plan and really also focusing on those broad reach tactics like demographic, geographic, and contextual? These results can really give you insight into how well your digital marketing is performing compared to your competitors. The second one here in the middle top really focuses on the fact that you do have to prioritize digital to improve performance. So I'm not saying that you should prioritize digital over other media types. What I'm saying is that if you want to have a robust and successful digital strategy that drives ROI, then you need to put in the time, money, and energy to make that work. You need to invest in it, which actually aligns with this third point here on breaking down data silos for greater insight and performance. So digital performance is really tied to the level of priority that advertisers give it. And in these results, Nielsen observed a significant difference in performance between brands with focused advertiser-led digital strategies that leverage technology initiatives versus brands without. And siloed channel-specific strategies, tactics, and metrics is no longer effective. You need to have that overall integrated strategy. It does require multifunctional operating models across analytics, media, technology, and third-party suppliers in order to deliver those step change growth opportunities in your digital marketing. And everything, of course, needs to be focused on the consumer. So the next one here, invest in action-based data for higher ROI. I think I've said this one enough, but if there's one thing that you should take away from this conversation today, it's that using audience data that is action-based from those who have, for example, purchased from your company or from a competitor in the past, will have a significant impact on your results. The higher the quality data based on verified action, the higher ROI and impact you can have. And while this data requires a greater investment than other data types that may be easier to obtain, it does deliver much higher returns. And the more you know about your target, the better chance you have of influencing their purchase. But you have to remember to choose a data type and a targeting strategy that does align with your business goals. Of course, mine data to find new audiences. Viewing your data creatively can allow you to uncover audiences that may differ from current or traditional customers, test messaging and offers on new data sources and audiences to see if you can drive results with overlooked targets. So having that, that test and learn mentality, really being okay to go out there to try new things and fail sometimes, but I can guarantee that if you really go out there with a test and learn mentality, you're going to find audiences that you didn't consider in the past, or you maybe weren't reaching in the past for whatever reason, that are going to be extremely incremental for your brand. And of course, choose the best attribution technique for your objectives. So there's two really common measurement approaches out there with marketing mix modeling and multi-touch attribution, and they're built to support different objectives. So while marketing mix modeling provides strategic insights across your portfolio for budgeting and long-term planning, marketers seeking tactical insights for short-term granular optimization should really lean into and consider multi-touch attribution. Multi-touch attribution combines the power of audience insights and marketing performance with clarity into which channels and tactics influence a specific audience. Marketers can not only orchestrate optimal consumer experience across channels and devices, but also optimize spend to maximize business results. And the two solutions that I referenced, Mix and MTA, they really complement each other, helping you understand the breadth of your portfolio with the granularity of your digital. And ultimately, MTA allows you to connect your online exposure with your in-store sales, bridging that gap that CPG companies face while trying to optimize their digital strategy. So, just to wrap it up today, and then we'll open it up to questions, there is a marketing intelligence gap in CPG, but there really doesn't have to be. There's endless data out there and room to grow and optimize in the digital world. This is not a transparent world, and everybody should take action and ownership. And I hope that this information today can help you take another step towards an optimal digital strategy. So with that, I think I will open it up to questions and see what people are thinking about out there.
Great. Thanks so much, Dina, for sharing the insights of this study with our audience. We do have some questions coming in, but as a reminder, please feel free to submit your questions at any time. If we're not able to get to your question today, we will be sure to have someone follow up with you directly post-webinar. Also, as a reminder, the webinar is being recorded, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email with the link to watch the on-demand video. All right, let's get to a few questions here. The first one, how should DMPs and measurement work together?
Yeah, definitely. So DMPs and measurement, and I'll focus on multi-touch attribution for the purposes of this question, I guess. They really work together to provide sort of that end-to-end framework. DMPs can help you, as I mentioned, collect all your data into one location, really boil it down, look for those audiences that you want to go after and help you activate against them. MTA that would then jump in by actually measuring that audience performance in market, providing really granular recommendations and opportunity areas for how you can optimize your audiences, which that information can get passed back into a DMP so that you have this nice cycle of planning and optimization and activation, which will allow you to constantly improve your digital strategy. So they work very nicely together, and I think it's really important to make sure that when you're leaning into some sort of centralized data hub and some sort of attribution solution, you make sure that they are working together and talking, whether it's the actual technology or the people that are working on those solutions.
Great. And can you clarify the acronym CPG, what that means?
Yeah, CPG, it stands for consumer packaged goods. So when we think about consumer packaged goods, I think the easiest way to think about it, honestly, is anything that you can buy in some sort of like grocery store or drugstore or mass merchandise store. So anything like that, consumer packaged goods.
Perfect, thank you. What exactly does incremental sales mean?
Yes, and I think that's a good question. It's important to make sure that we understand here. So there's a difference between, so I guess I'll give an example. If somebody buys, let's just say, a specific yogurt brand, every other week they buy that yogurt brand. They buy, a jug of yogurt every other week, no matter what. You might serve them ads constantly, and it's not going to change their purchase behavior. They're still going to buy that yogurt every other week. Now, if you serve somebody an ad, and let's say they buy their yogurt every other week, and you serve them an ad that convinces them to try a new yogurt. So instead, 1 week of just buying that same yogurt, they buy 2 so that they can have their standard and try out the new yogurt. And your ad has driven them to actually make that purchase that they wouldn't have made, then we would consider that an incremental purchase. It's essentially it's a purchase that took place due to the fact that consumer or that person was exposed to your ad that would not have taken place otherwise. And so in our analysis, we're only looking at the incremental purchases, only looking at the sales that took place because of the ad that would not have taken place otherwise.
And how should MTA work with marketing mix?
Yeah, so I kind of talked through that a little bit at the end there, but with mix, I think there's talk out there, well, does MTA replace mix, or how does it work with it? And really it doesn't. MTA and mix complement each other perfectly, and I think to get a full view and really be able to optimize effectively and efficiency, you need both. You need mix, which covers the breadth of your portfolio, so it helps you really optimize your spend across your entire portfolio, across your advertising, consumer promotions, trade, right, across the breadth of your portfolio. And MTA comes in with more granular data. Our MTA is really at that household level, which allows us to get very deep into that digital component and say all the way down to the creative, by placement, by campaign, by site, by device, by week level. How do you optimize your digital portfolio within? So it really covers that depth, that granularity of digital, where mix covers the breadth of your entire portfolio.
Great, thanks. Here's another one. Did you look at different digital ad types like video, audio, or is this all display?
Yep. No, so this does go across ad types, and what we found is that generally obviously there's some fluctuation in ROI and things like that when you look at different ad types, but generally the results and the rankings seem to really hold across ad types. I will say that the main ad types that we do look at here are video and display. There's others that are included but don't have, I guess, quite as much data in this analysis, so it's mainly video and display, but it would cover both ad types.
Great. All right, and one other one here too. How do you know that your solution is showing incremental sales?
Yeah, so we're very lucky at Nielsen because we have all this amazing data that we can leverage in our analysis. So when we do our analysis, and whoever's asking this question, if you want to shoot me a note, we can also follow up offline. But when we do our multi-touch attribution analysis, we bring in all this other Nielsen data on top of the digital and in-store sales data that we're actually reporting on. So we bring in all this other data like historical purchase behavior, price point, TV exposure, seasonality, holidays, which essentially allows us to control for everything else that's going on and really isolate that digital impact. So that's, I guess, a very quick and high-level answer of how we know that our solution is truly delivering incrementality.
Great, excellent. Well, I think that is going to do it. Thank you so much, Gina. We are definitely approaching the end of the session, but as a reminder, if we were unable to get to your question today, we will be sure to have someone follow up with you directly. With that, I want to thank our speaker, Gina, and also thank you, our audience, for taking time out of your busy day to join us. We certainly look forward to seeing you at a future Nielsen webinar.
Thank you.